Over the years, different sites have gone in and out of the meta within Rainbow Six Siege, as not only do weapons change a lot, but the meta does too. So what site is currently the best to use? Well, I think it's the 1.5x scope, and here's why. We are currently in a really aggressive gunfight heavy kind of meta. It's actually being referred to as the TDM meta because of how fast and aggressive people are playing. Strategy is starting to get less important, as you don't really need to strategize as much, you just need to win your gunfights. People are starting to bring less utility as well, and instead of replacing it with operators that bring a good weapon that have a 1.5 scope on it. But why the 1.5 scope and not something else? Well, it's because the 1.5 scope is in a good happy medium. It's in a sweet spot where it's not too zoomed in, but it's also not too zoomed out. It has the perfect in between where you can still see your target while still being able to see around your target as well. It's so good that it's making operators that have it be picked more compared to others. That's why you see operators like Warden get picked so much. Even though his gadget is very situational, his gun is really good and it has a 1.5 scope on it. That combo is extremely deadly because it allows whoever's using him to get more kills. Another example is if you look at the operator Wilmai. His pick rate has gone up just because he got the 1.5 scope on his gun. Given, yes, his gadget is good, but literally just because he got the 1.5 scope on his gun, it caused his pick rate to go up. That's the kind of impact that this scope has. It could single-handedly increase the pick rate of an operator. The same goes for when a 1.5 scope gets taken off of a gun that an operator has. For example, look at Alibi. Her pick rate went down just because she got the 1.5 scope taken off of her SMG. That's all they did. They didn't nerf her ability or take away an important piece of utility. All they did was take away the 1.5 scope and her pick rate went down. The same goes for Oryx. Oryx got his 1.5 scope taken away and now his pick rate is lower, all because of the scope. This scope is just that good that it can increase or decrease an operator's pick rate. But why? Why is it so good? Well, I think it's because it's just the perfect magnification for the current meta. Once upon a time when people played more slowly and fights were taken at longer distances, it wasn't as good. In that time, the 2.5 scope was the king. It was the sight that ruled king for years until the 1.5 scope got added. Then the meta started to get more and more aggressive. Now gunfights are being taken at a lot closer of distances. So while the 2.5 scope is still usable, it's not ideal because the magnification is just too zoomed in for the closer gunfights. However, the 1.5 scope is the perfect zoom to take those closer gunfights and still have some sort of magnification. Unlike the one-time scopes that don't really have any magnification at all, which again doesn't mean they're bad, it just means they're not as ideal. You still want to have some sort of magnification to see heads easier so you're able to get headshots a lot more. Not to mention the 1.5 scope sights are just really clean. It has a little dot with a circle around it. How much more simple can it get? It's easy to look through and easy to see the enemy's head, unlike some sights. Some scopes have a really condensed or cluttered sights, making it hard to see the enemy's head. So now you might be thinking, if this scope is so good, then why don't they either nerf it or remove it from the game? Well, if they nerfed it, I still think people would use it regardless, just because what could they really even do to nerf it besides change the zoom a little bit or change the sights? Regardless of what they did, it would still be the best option. So what if they removed it? Well, then it would force people to either use the one-time scope or the two-time scope, which would cause a lot of people to be mad. It would also force all the defenders to have a one-time scope while all the attackers would have a two-time scope. That means at closer ranges, the defenders would always do better, while at longer ranges, the attackers would always do better. In other words, it would create an imbalance. They would have to start giving defenders two-time scopes on their guns just to make it fair. However, this would make things like spawn peeking a lot easier and allow defenders to hold even longer lines of sight on attackers, which would be too OP. Now yes, some defenders in the game already have two-time scopes, but they're given to bad defenders and or they're on bad guns. Imagine if someone like Warden got a two-time scope or even Wilmai. I think that would be too OP. I think the 1.5 times scope is here to stay, even though it is a powerful scope. Without it, there would just be too much of an imbalance. But who knows, they could do what they did to the 2.5 times scope and try to remove it from almost every operator in the game. I guess only time will tell. In conclusion, the best sight to use in Rainbow Six Siege is the 1.5 times scope. It's just the perfect balance to where it's not too zoomed in, but it's also not too zoomed out. It also has the best sight in the game, as well as the best peripherals out of any scope. The scope is so powerful that it could put operators in the meta just by getting the scope added to them, as well as take operators out of the meta if they get the scope removed from them. Not to mention, it's currently the best scope for the current meta because it's gunfight heavy. People are playing extremely aggressive and gunfights are getting closer and closer, making it the perfect scope. Now you might be thinking, why don't they just nerf it or remove it? But I think it's unlikely they'll do that, because if they nerf it, people will still use it regardless. And if they remove it, then it'll create a serious imbalance. So if you're looking for the best scope to use to get more kills and win more games, then I highly recommend you use the 1.5 times scope right now. However, at the end of the day, it is all personal preference. So really just use what you're most comfortable with if you don't like the 1.5 times scope. That's it for me though. What are your opinions on the best scope in Rainbow Six Siege? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like. And if you want more content like this, then subscribe. Have a great day, everyone.
Seconds remaining.